What's up everyone, this is VideoBox here, and I'm going to do a deck profile for you guys today, revolving around the card called Chicken Race, which is a new card from Clash of Rebellions. And without further ado, here's the deck. So I'll start off with the monsters. I run 3 Royal Magical Library, 3 Thunder Dragons, and 1 Summoner Monk. Now onto the spells. So I run 3 Chicken Game, which I'll explain in detail a little bit later. 3 Pseudo Space, 3 Terraforming, 3 Into the Void, 3 Upstart Goblin, 3 Dark World Dealings, 1 Hand Destruction, 1 Broken Bamboo Sword, 3 Golden Bamboo Sword, 3 Cursed Bamboo Sword, 2 Magical Stone Excavation, 2 Magical Mallet, and the last spell 1 Soul Charge. Now onto traps, which are 1 Magical Explosion and 1 Life Equalizer. Now the premise of the deck is actually pretty simple. Basically what you're trying to do with the deck is to basically draw out all of the spells in your deck using the help of various draw cards, along with the effective Royal Magical Library, which is for every 3 spells that you activate, you can remove 3 spell counters from it and draw a card from your deck. To make that process a little easier, a new card from the Clash of Rebellions came out, which is this Chicken Game card right here. Let me zoom in on it a little bit. So the effect is the player with the lowest life points takes no damage. Once per turn during the main phase, the turn player can pay 1,000 life points, then activate one of these effects, which is to draw 1 card, destroy this card, or your opponent gains 1,000 life points. Regardless of which of these 3 effects you pick, nothing can be responded to it. But generally the effect that you use the most is to draw that extra card in your deck. So coupled with Chicken Game, along with other draw cards that I showed earlier in the deck contents, you're supposed to basically draw out the entire deck until you draw into the Magical Explosion and the Life Equalizer. So the basic premise of the deck is you're trying to draw into these 2 traps, and then your deck is supposed to pretty much be set up where you can actually activate Magical Explosion and Life Equalizer at the same time. Okay, so now that you know the premise of the deck, I'm going to go over some of the things that you need to keep in mind as you play through this deck. Because for this Magical Explosion FTK version, you do have to play until you actually draw into these 2 traps, in which you can set and use on the opponent. But there are actually a few other cards that you need to be able to activate and resolve in order to be able to set these 2 traps off. The first card is actually Upstart Goblin. Having your opponent gain the 1,000 life points is actually pretty relevant because you're trying to make the difference between your life points and your opponent's life points at least 8,000. So activating the 3 Upstart Goblins actually helps towards that goal. Obviously you'll get the other 1,000 life points when you activate Chicken Game and the other copies, as well as Pseudo Space. So this will take care of on average 6,000 of the life points, because you have 3 copies of Chicken Game and you also have 3 copies of Pseudo Space to copy the effect of Chicken Game. So that leaves you at around 2,000, but the Upstart Goblin is what actually is used to make Life Equalizer be able to activate. And the other card that you actually have to draw into and activate is Into the Void, which is the card where you draw 1 card from your deck, and then at the end of the turn your hand goes to the graveyard. The reason that's important is because for Magical Explosion you need to have no hand to activate this card. So if you have cards in your hand at the end of your turn, you can't activate this card, which is why it's important to activate at least 1 copy of Into the Void. It's also fair to mention that Royal Magical Library is also a huge part of the deck. Although you can actually win without using it, all Library really does is to ensure that you have another way of drawing extra cards into your deck. I've actually had a few games where I've actually tested myself where if the library was stopped, I can still actually keep going. Granted, I won't get the spell counters I need to draw those extra cards, but I'm also able to do just enough to be able to activate these 2 cards and get game. Assuming you have everything set up and ready to go, where you activate Into the Void and you activated enough Upstart Goblins to meet the criteria for Life Equalizer, before you would end your turn, you would set the 2 trap cards face down, and then when your opponent's turn begins, you would activate Magical Explosion as Chainlink 1, and then you activate Life Equalizer as Chainlink 2. So what this effectively does is Life Equalizer balances the life points where each player gets 3,000 life points, and then Magical Explosion should inflict at least 3,000 points of damage to get game. So basically, while you're solitaring through the entire deck, which is mainly spells, you're adding a bunch of spells into your graveyard where you can actually Magical Explode your opponent, and that's pretty much the point of how to get game with this deck. Another strategy that's integral to this deck is actually the Bamboo Sword engine, which is basically using Golden Bamboo Sword along with any of the equips to draw 2 cards from your deck. But the Cursed Bamboo Sword is a card that recently came out, which gives this engine a bigger utility. The Cursed Bamboo Sword has an effect where if it's sent to the graveyard, you can add a Bamboo Sword card from your deck to your hand. Primarily, you'd want to add either the Broken Bamboo Sword or the Golden Bamboo Sword. I would say about 90% of the time you add the Golden Bamboo Sword, mainly because it's a way to add a card that lets you draw 2 from your deck pretty easily. And the way to get this card into the graveyard would normally be to discard it by cards such as Dark World Dealings, which makes a player draw a card then discard a card. So basically, Dark World Dealings is normally a -1, but if you discard the Cursed Bamboo Sword and search Golden, you don't lose any actual advantage by using this. And another card to use is Magical Stone Excavation to discard the Cursed Bamboo Sword. Chances are when you use Magical Stone Excavation, you'll get back a Golden Bamboo Sword from your graveyard. So ultimately, even though you have to discard 2 to use the effect, it isn't ultimately that bad, because your ultimate goal is to, get Magical Explosion and Life Equalizer to go off anyway, so the advantage won't really matter that much. Now, because the deck runs Soul Charge in the main deck, this actually does give you some access to a partial extra deck. There are many examples I can really go over, but I'm just going to go over one generic scenario that I used a few times. Let's see. With Thunder Dragon's effect, you can pitch itself to add 2 more copies from the deck to your hand. Let's say like during the course of the turn you have 2 Thunder Dragons in the graveyard. You can activate Soul Charge, pay 2,000, get back your Thunder Dragons, and let's say you already have a chicken game on the field that you've already used the effect for. You can go ahead and overlay the 2 Thunder Dragons into a rank 5 Constellar Pleiades, because that card is just too good. So basically what you can do is detach the Thunder Dragon, return the chicken game to your hand, activate it again, and then use its effect again. It's not really something that you use as a plan A, but it's something that you can actually consider doing because you have the option to do so. And the reason this strategy also works is because it gives you a monster in which to equip a Bamboo Sword card to, so you can actually activate Golden Bamboo Sword if you're having a hard time drawing into the Royal Magical Library. Alright, so as good as the deck is, it's not to say that this deck doesn't actually have any weaknesses. Yeah, there's the clear weakness where if you don't draw a good hand, but some of the weaknesses for this deck actually do involve the actual strategies the opponent may have for this deck, and a lot of them actually involve the Royal Magical Library. For instance, like if you use Effect Veiler on Royal Magical Library, for most people that would be a game over because it can't add any counters onto itself and you can't remove any counters to draw cards. Another example would be Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. That's also another card that can actually mess up this card. Mind you that adding counters onto this card isn't an effect that activates, it's a continuous effect, but that ultimately means that if you were to remove the 3 counters to draw a card, which does activate, you'll get that 1 draw, but Ghost Ogre would destroy the card, which leaves you with less options to which to draw out your deck. And then another weakness that I can think of is Drone Lockbird, which is something that people side to prevent players from adding cards to their hand. It is something that's unfortunate, but it's something that can happen. But ultimately, the deck is fast enough where if the opponent doesn't have any of those cards in their hand to stop you, then they're going to be hard pressed to do anything about it, as they just sit there and they watch you solitaire through the entire deck. But of course, this is only one version of the deck. I mean, Chicken Game is actually a pretty utilizable card. You can use it in other methods. I mean, yeah, the Life Equalizer Magical Explosion combo is actually pretty good. But you can also run this pretty much same exact build using the pieces of Exodia as well. Where instead of trying to burn the opponent for game with these two cards, you're basically just trying to use the Chicken Game engine and Royal Magical Library to just draw the pieces of Exodia. That's also something that this deck can actually sight into if you want to use it competitively. I know that this deck is kind of cringeworthy for the opponent to really sit through, but I mean, it has a pretty high success consistency rate, which is why it has an appeal to a lot of people. So I would say that if you have the pieces for this deck already, why not just make the deck? I mean, yeah, it's full of a lot of cards that are fairly expensive, kind of like Into the Void. This card's actually, I think, around $2 to $3 per copy, so... But I mean, like, if you have the pieces for it, have fun with it. Like, even if you don't have anyone to play against, like, this deck pretty much plays by itself. But, yeah, this is a profile that I wanted to do for quite a while. I actually had the pieces for it ready. I was just waiting for this card to come out. But, until next time, this is VideoBox with a deck profile. Peace out, guys.